All right. So, see who else is going to be joining us here in a moment. I'm going to send out an invite. Okay. Under Ildi. Okay. I'm going to be sending out another invite. I know not everybody subscribed. We're going to be talking about character traits and predictions today, which is still underneath the umbrella of inferring. So that's what's on the menu. Make sure that you go and log on the website. Today, I'm going to be entering in attendance. And again, they're going to be sending me a report on who's been using Aztec. So we need to spend quality time on Aztec. See how many people are going to be joining us. So the message was delivered to 13 people, 11 people read it. So we should have at least another 8 people joining us. Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. As we're working on the assignments, anybody else supposed to be here, I'll reach out to them. So, first thing again, I want to say is let's make sure that we're using Aztec. Okay. I know that right now things are weird and life is barely starting to go back to normal. So, not everybody necessarily has the time to do Aztec before or after. I will give you class time to do it. Here's my only thing with that is I like to do the live stream and I like to have everybody participating, knowing what we're doing. And I hate losing like an hour of that to do Aztec when we can do that on our own time. But I also understand that everybody's busy, so we can start at 9:30, anywhere from 9:30 to 10:30, if that makes it easier for you guys to be able to get in that hour. But we need to do that. Yes, it's helpful. You heard the whole speech about data. On the other side of it is the fact that everything we do in the class is tracked, right? And as things are opening up and testing facilities will become available, if Michael and the powers that be, the administrative side of CSN, if they see that we have hours on Aztec, that's one way they gauge who's ready to test. That's another way that they gauge how much they need to reach out to the HISET corporation and start getting things going, looking at testing facilities, proctors. There's a lot that goes in there. We just had a grant that was approved. That was just the WIA money, I think, that came through. So there's a lot of traction. If they're not really hearing from us, if they're because they check those reports, if people aren't really logging on and no one's reaching out to them, what'll end up happening is that they're going to go, it's a wash. Everything that's happened, nobody's ready to test. They're barely logging on to the classes and they're not using Aztec, and then it'll go away. And that's what I want to avoid. So I want them to be motivated so that everyone can start. I don't recommend it, but you can take the practice test and then take the actual test. I always recommend taking the actual test. But again, we have these resources, right? Even the Sahara West Testing Center, to my knowledge, is still closed. I don't see them opening it, um, even though everything's starting to open up more across the state. I don't see them opening it if we don't have verifiable participation. That's why we do the website. That's why I record these lessons. Everything that we do can be tracked, right? Everything is numbers and data, and that's what we want. We want it to be something where as you're reaching out to Michael, hey, are you going to open the testing facility? Hey, if the HISA people don't want to do it directly, can we do it as Sahara West? First thing he's going to be looking at is Aztec. If he's wondering what we're doing in class, if he's wondering about what standard we're on, anything like that, we have the website, right? So this is also why I send all of your attendance records directly to him and Claudia and the powers that be so they know that people are actively participating. So it's incredibly important that we get onto Aztec. I cannot beat that enough. It is incredibly, incredibly important. I know that we started class a little bit later today to give everyone time to do Aztec, and the internet was being weird. For the remainder of the class, now that things are opening up, I imagine we're going to have better signal, um, because we're not going to have to share the internet with everyone in my neighborhood like we're doing now because everybody was home. So before we get started, any questions? Questions, questions, questions? Don't see any questions yet. No questions. Okay, good. Okay. Again, we're going to be using the conference call feature. Everybody must participate. I'd like to hear from you. This is not a podcast, okay? So I'm gonna put the number up. We're gonna call in, but I want everybody to participate. We're getting down to the wire. We got a couple of weeks left of class, and I want everyone to speak up and feel confident that they're ready to test. This class was solely created so that everyone can get together and test. So if we can't test because the testing center is not open, that's fine, but not because we weren't prepared. So I'm going to be calling in now. I expect everybody else to call in. We're going to be talking about character traits, predictions, and basically inferences. I can guarantee there's going to be some questions. I can see the comments, so it cooperated with me in that extent. So if it's easier for you with the comments, that's fine. Um, what I don't want is just people that are not responding in the comments, not responding to the conference call, and then I have no idea, if we're working. Oh, so Cole joined. Okay. So again, please join the conference call. Okay. All right, love it. Who just joined us? Okay. Okay, perfect.
Andrew, hey.
Okay. Love to hear your guys' beautiful voices. All right, who just joined us?
Hi, good morning, Mariana.
Okay, bienvenidos. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. It looks like we got almost everybody here. Okay. So, character traits, this is going to be the biggest component of fiction, right? We talked about how within literature, which means fiction, right? So, under the banner of literature, characters or character traits, this is a reading standard, right? In kindergarten or in like primary grades, you would be asked all the way up until maybe about third grade about physical character traits, right? So physical character traits are just as they sound, right? So physical character traits are going to be things like whether people are tall, whether they are strong, small, weak. Okay. We're not going to be getting too many physical character traits. In fact, if you get any question where they're asking you about physical traits, it's going to be a question that's related to how that physical trait reflects their personality, right? So, for example, someone who is determined and hardworking and dedicated and ambitious, we would like to believe would treat their body the same way and they would be strong and athletic, so on and so forth. This is where we start getting into predictions, okay? So it's important that whenever we're reading, this is something else we're always highlighting and taking notes on is how the characters act. Question so far?
No question.
No question.
All right.
No question. No question.
Okay, I know you guys are with me. Así sé que no se están durmiendo. Okay. So the reason that character traits can be a little difficult is because as you're reading the story, some things sound so random where you're like, oh, the person picked up a can. Oh, the person works at a restaurant. And you're not understanding necessarily that since this is a fiction story, all of that was done on purpose. So there's a reason why they're working in a restaurant. There's a reason why they picked up a can. And they're supposed to be revealing their character traits. So, how do we figure out character traits? First thing you want to look at is behavior, right? The way that the characters behave lets you know about their personality, right? Because character traits is just a fancy way of saying personality, right? So if you look at their behavior in the story, it's going to reveal their personality. So in fiction, because nothing, it's not real, even historical fiction, most of it is going to be possible but didn't happen. Everything is for a reason. So think about the way they behaved. If they're rude to people, if they're liars, if they're scared, if they're shy, all of those behaviors are creating a personality that they're going to ask you about later, right? Along with behavior, you have to look at dialogue. Okay? This is when characters are talking. you're going to get a lot of questions that are going to pull a comment that was made from a character, and they're going to ask you how that tells you what's going to happen in the future. They're going to ask you what that reveals about the character, all of that. You're going to get a lot of questions about that. Questions so far before we move on? Questions, questions, questions.
No question.
All right. Anybody else? Questions, questions?
No question.
No questions?
No question.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. All right. So let's look at, for example, when we're thinking about the story that we saw a couple of days ago about the boy who stole the medicine for his mother who was sick. Okay. So you may have to read a similar story, and they're going to ask you and say, when the father came, or I'm sorry, the other shop owner came and said, "Is your mom sick? Is that why you stole the medicine?" You're going to get a question that's going to say, in that moment when he said, "Is your mom sick?" or something like that, "Is that why you're stealing the medicine?" They're going to ask you, how is that foreshadowing what's going to happen? How is that predicting something that's going to happen in the future? Okay. So with these character traits, all of that is supposed to help you predict, right? So when we saw the end of that video, we know that because he was stealing the medicine to help his mom, the same guy who paid for the medicine, it would make sense. It's poetic. It's a lesson that he's going to get sick and he's going to get help from the same boy that he helped out, who's now a doctor, right? And that's like the lesson: pay it forward, help people, etc. So they're going to take that piece of evidence, they're going to take that conversation that they had, and they're going to ask you to evaluate their character and predict. So as you read, highlight the behaviors. Think about what that says about their personality. What are they saying? Right? This is going to be incredibly important. Um, and I'm going to give you another piece of advice here that's going to be helpful. So, and if I'm pretty sure I mentioned this to you guys, I used to be a private investigator. So I used to investigate pedophiles and murderers and all kinds of evil people. And one of the things that was always big for us was the idea of proving this before a jury, right? That this person shouldn't be around kids, that this person's lying about being injured, whatever. And there's a legal clause that it's very helpful for character traits. This is something we use in courtrooms, which is called the reasonable and prudent person clause, right? A reasonable and prudent person. And here's what I mean by that. When we are making predictions, we have to go with what the story is telling us, right? So if someone is growing up, for example, in a bad area, you don't have both parents, and your friends are doing things that are illegal, and your school is bad, a reasonable and prudent person would make the assumption that you're going to have a tough life and that the odds of being successful are going to be low, right? That doesn't mean it's impossible. But again, a reasonable and prudent person would make that decision, make that determination based off of what they're given, right? Because past performance is the best indicator of future behavior, right? So you got to think about that because normally in the story, when they're dropping those hints about the characters, it's for a reason. They're going to switch something up in the future. Something's going to change. So, I'm sorry. If they're revealing those things, it's going to be relevant later, right? And if there is a change, there's a lesson in the change, right? When we're talking about the climax, right? Or the rising action where the character is going to come face to face with the problem, when that happens, the main character will change. And there's a lesson in that, right? So everything up until that point, you have to look at as a reasonable and prudent person, right? In fact, if you get good at looking at things from a reasonable perspective, like what would normally happen, you can probably predict what you're going to read You'll predict what the questions are going to be. You're going to predict what's going to happen in the story because most of it has to follow a pattern and most of it is going to be reasonable, right? In fact, in text, especially in fiction stories, when something is not reasonable, it makes it interesting because it doesn't follow the regular pattern of a story, right? Like in The Sixth Sense, when Bruce Willis says, I see dead people, or I'm sorry, when he was the dead person, right? That wasn't very reasonable. We would think the whole story is going to be about his relationship with the child and how he's going to manage his superpowers, and that was going to be the end. That was an unnecessary twist. A reasonable person wouldn't have seen that coming. So if you were to get questions about that, they would ask you, well, now that you know he was dead the whole time, what were some clues? Or what about his behavior let you know that he wasn't really there? You know, those types of questions. So always think about that. When you're making a prediction, when you're looking at what's going to happen, reasonable and prudent. What evidence do you have that a reasonable person would agree with you, right? Bringing it back to the investigator time, that was the most important thing. Yeah, you know this person's guilty. Yeah, you know this person did it, but how can you make a jury understand that, right? How can you make an argument that a reasonable person wouldn't do this, right? Question so far.
No question.
Only one person doesn't have a question? Questions, questions, questions?
No question.
Okay, let's see. Sam, any questions? No, no, no. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, what's that?
No question.
Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put up an assignment and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to time this. You're going to read, this is an excerpt. You're going to get a lot of excerpts on the test. Excerpts are pieces of a story, right? So you know it may not have a clear beginning. You know it's not going to have a clear end. So you're going to have to come up with what the setting is. You're going to have to infer that. You're going to have to look at predictions based off what they're giving you because you may get the middle of the story, you may get the end, you know it's not the complete thing. So you're going to have to fill that in. And the setting can really affect the character, right? A really ambitious businessman can be great in one story, but if the setting is a business, but that same person can be very bad if the setting is like the streets or the ghetto, right? So you got to consider that when it comes to what you're missing. And to keep it simple, I'm going to put it right back on to the same assignment we've been working in Class Kick, so nobody has to worry about getting a bunch of links. And this text is 1, 2, 3. It's about 5 paragraphs long. You're only going to have 3 questions. So if we do this well, then we'll move on to word choice and some things that are more focused on predictions. If we're struggling, then we're going to work on some more. All right, who just joined us?
Maria.
Okay, bienvenidos, Maria. All right. So if you log back on to Class Kick, the very last link I sent out, I will send out another one if we need to. You're going to see that the very last page is going to be the assignment, and I'm loading that in. Given the fact that you have, what, an hour? Look back at the graphic I sent out. So for the reading portion, and this includes the multiple choice and the essay, for the reading portion of the high set, you have an hour and 5 minutes. So when you have a text with multiple questions, I would try with notes and answering the questions to take probably like no more than 5 to maybe 7 minutes, given the fact that you have only an hour and 5 minutes, right? If you take, let's say if you took 15 minutes of that time, you know, you're looking at almost taking like a fifth of the time, and now you see that it hurts you. So we want to work on reading quickly and effectively, right? Taking notes, things like that. Okay. So I'm going to be uploading this in as soon as I see that everybody's on, because Classic does tell me when everybody's on, then I'll start the timer. I'm just going to do a stopwatch to see when everybody is finished. So when you're done, you can either send me a message in the live chat, use a conference call, Classic, a million ways to get a hold of me. Let me know, and then I'll let you know about how long you took to read. And again, everybody should have notes, right? So everybody should be writing down who the characters are, what they're doing. Doesn't have to be elaborate notes, but enough so that you get in the habit of digesting the text.
Excuse me, Mr. Moda.
Yes.
One question, please.
Yes.
Is this the page number 10? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Totally now.
Yeah. That's why I love Classic.
Page.
Yeah, so I can put it in. So that's why I like it. So if this is easy, I can upload something else. If this is hard, I can upload more in real time. So you see it immediately.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Okay, so I'm going to send out the link. If you already had the link before, go ahead and log on to it. If not, I'm going to send it in the live chat. If you need me to email it, I can email it as well. And then I'm going to be checking it to see when everybody's logged on, and we're going to get started with the practice questions. Okay, so I see that Alma is on, Andre is on, Coro is on, Ildi is on, Maria is on, Mariana is on. Okay, so Sam likes the link. Yep. So Sam, I'm gonna send you the link to the live chat. I'll also email it to you as well.
I just got it now.
You just got it? Okay. Okay, we got Alma joined. Okay. So remember, we're working on page 10. Everything else you've done is here, and this is something else I can share with Michael and say, hey, this is everybody working. So everyone should be on page 10, the very last slide. I'm allowing you guys to help each other on this. So if you see the little hand in the corner, if you press it, you can ask for help from your friends as well. If you ask for all the answers, obviously that's not helpful. Okay, so we got everybody on. So I'm going to start the timer. Let's see how long it's taking us to work. All right, time is starting now. So remember, guys, to take notes as I'm going through, I'm seeing a lot of blank papers. Remember, you only have an hour and 5 minutes on the real test. So you may get, I don't know, five, six questions that are passages and come with their own separate questions. If you were to just take 10 minutes on each one of those, you would literally take almost half of your time on those three passages. So, should be taking notes, working quickly. So remember, guys, to take notes because if you have three passages like this and you take 10 minutes on each passage, that's half your time. So as I'm going through, I'm seeing a lot of blank papers, no notes. So let's make sure that we use the time wisely. So you know they're going to be asking you about the characters. You know what the reading standards are. Look for those as we work. We're 3 minutes in. All right, we are 6 minutes in. Maria, are you still on the conference call? Because I'm looking and I have not seen any work. Yeah. If you're writing on a separate sheet of paper, just for now, I prefer that you use ClassKick. If you prefer that, when you go into the test, make sure you stay consistent with that. Ask for extra paper. And I still want to see your notes. I want to see how you digest the text. So there's a couple of standards that are tied with that. And there's also a lot of other teaching philosophies that are attached to that as well, like applying the text to your own life. That's called text to self, making those predictions, the way that you look at dialogue and figurative language, all of that is important. So that's why I like ClassKick. If you're using it on a separate sheet of paper and you're more comfortable with that, I prefer to use ClassKick. But if not, I just want to at least see what you're using to work on. There's a couple of people that I have not seen any work from at all. So um, haven't seen any work yet from Maria. It's completely blank. And excuse me. Okay, is working. Okay. Okay. So we're going to be about 12 minutes into this. So be conscious of the fact that this is a 5 paragraph text with only 3 questions, and we're taking almost going on to 13 minutes to answer, and that's not going to be helpful for the test. Not to say we speed read necessarily, but for this, I would want to see some notes, and we should definitely be on the questions by now. 12 minutes in.
Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
I can hear.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, okay, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I was just saying that we're about 13 minutes into the test, and when this assignment, the actual test is 65 minutes long. So if we were to take this long on an assignment there, it could hurt you, right? Because taking, let's say, like 15 minutes, a nice simple number, that's almost like a fifth of the time just spent on a few questions. So it's not that we want to speed through it, but we definitely want to have notes and answer the questions in a timely manner. And there's some people that I have not worked that I have not seen any work from at all. So Maria is one of them. I'm not sure what's going on there. So if you prefer taking notes on a separate sheet of paper, I have no problem with that. I just want to be able to see the paper and have you stick with something consistently. Because when you're testing, if you need paper, you want to make sure you ask for that ahead of time and that you're still working diligently, right? When we get to text with related graphics, it's going to be important that you know how to take notes on a separate sheet of paper because you're probably not going to be able to take any notes directly on the graph itself. So we're approaching 14 minutes into the question.
Are we supposed to let you know when we're done, or
Yes,
everybody's getting the
I
same?
saw that you were done.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm in
oh,
corals
I
right
am.
now.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I haven't seen that Maria has done anything. Um, ooh, great question. Oh man, I love this. Okay. As some of you guys are writing down your thoughts about things that don't make sense in the text, or you're looking at like inconsistencies, great thing to do, because that really shows that you're connected to the text. So that is awesome. That's going to serve you very well when you're testing. And you may not get a clear answer to some of the questions you write down, but it shows that you're connected to the text. And that's going to be helpful in terms of answering the questions and working diligently. You're really digesting what you're reading. Okay, so it looks like I've gotten work out of pretty much everybody. Okay, wait. So I haven't seen anything from Maria. I know Andre. Okay. Okay. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it here. So we're about 17 minutes in. So right now is 17 minutes. So if you finished earlier, you could probably guesstimate about how much time you're taking to work. So I'm going to briefly read the passage and then we're going to go over the questions. We only had 3 questions. Okay. So if we didn't do well on all of them, I can I can get some additional questions about characters and we can work that. However, just because you miss 1 or 2 does not necessarily mean that we're going to do that. Just kind of depends on the situation, right? Because if we're not taking notes, then I'm not going to be surprised if we miss every single question. And I'm not going to know where to help you because I don't know how you're interpreting the text. So that's why we're going to read it together. And again, something else I'm going to mention before we get started. If English is not your first language, your notes do not have to be in English, especially when you write them. I can use Google Translate. So if you're writing them in Hebrew, Aramaic, whatever, if it helps you to understand what you're reading, that's fine. If those are your notes, I can easily translate them to see if they're worthwhile. So don't feel like you're pigeonholed to just writing down things in English. This is your test, your notes to help you understand. I do speak a couple of languages, and I don't. My notes are not always in English. Sometimes there's just words that are better in Spanish that make more sense. Sometimes there's words that are better, like in French or Chinese or whatever. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and look at the text. And so we are at 17 minutes. So I'm gonna see how long with our discussion it takes for us to finish. Excerpt from Hizakugi. Sounds like it's Japanese, maybe. I shall never forget it. The witch went on. What's that? Oh, somebody said something?
No, I said this story, this except from the Japanese.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah. When you were ill, you gave your sickness to me. Our only child who had to carry on our name grew weak and thin because there was no rice to fill his empty stomach. Every day, the bill collectors were knocking at the door and the rent remained unpaid. Yet I did not complain, not even when I slipped in the dog's dirt in the lane. Okay, so from that first paragraph, it sounds to me like the witch is unhappy. And it sounds like they were neglected because they're not eating. And she almost sounds vengeful. Well, assuming it's a female, they're talking about the fact that um, it was a son, and the fact that they're making a big deal about it being a son makes it seem like the story happened a long time ago. Because we're talking about witches, it seems to me like it's obviously going to be fantasy, not even kind of like historical fiction or anything like that. All right. Thank you, Coral. Yeah, she does talk about it. Come on. All right. Don't talk of it, said Yaji. You'll break my heart. And then, When through my labors I had saved enough money to buy a kimono, I had to pawn it for your sake and never saw it again. Never again did it come back to me from the pawnbrokers. Okay, so it looks here like the witch is talking about then giving up items, right? That they bought a kimono and then they had to pawn it. So again, if I'm taking notes, I'm sensing a lot of jealousy right now, and I'm sensing a lot of I don't want to say treachery, but it appears as though this person's probably going to want revenge, right? Because if you're talking about how you can't forget something and you had to pawn something, sounds to me like you're going to want to get some kind of revenge, right? That's my prediction. At the same time, you must remember what a pleasant place you are in now, said Yaji, while I have to worry along down here. So Yaji is talking about being worried down here. And you're going to see this a lot. They introduce Yaji. This is in the middle of a story. We don't know what the beginning is. We don't know what the setting is. So we're going to have to infer. So right here, this is definitely a fantasy story. And the witch seems to be jealous again and looks like they're going to want their revenge. And Yaji's another character that's talking to the witch. Again, we're not getting a clear exposition where we're getting introduced to the characters. We're kind of working backwards now. We're looking at trying to understand what happened before. So I can make some predictions that someone's going to get punished. What? What is there pleasant about it? I almost wonder if Yaji's maybe the mother, since they're talking back and forth, they're having that dialogue. Is it true that by the help of your friends you erected a stone over my grave, but you never go near it, and you never contribute to the temple to get the priest to say prayers for my soul? So I'm starting to infer, and I could be wrong, that Yaji is the mother, and then the witch is kind of saying, hey, this is why I did you dirty, because you never really took care of me. Talking about having an empty stomach and having to pawn the kimono. Okay. Is it true that okay, yeah. Okay. Okay. I am nothing to you. The stone over my grave has been taken away and put in the wall, where all the dogs come and make water against it. So this is a little bit of figurative language. Obviously, even though it's fantasy, I don't think that the dogs making water means that there's some kind of magical creature that make water. I'm pretty sure what they're implying there through indirect language is that the dogs are peeing on her headstone, which again is very disrespectful, right? I will be writing all of this down. Ooh, I love that. So Coral believes that it's not the mother, but it is the husband. Excellent. Because she mentions things like our child. Oh, okay. Very nice. No, and that's okay. In fact, actually, Corey, you did very well on this. Because we're getting the middle of the story, as long as you can justify why you think a character is whatever you think they are, that's fine. Because we don't have the complete story. That's what they mean by excerpt. This could be the middle, this could be the end, and they're not clearly introducing people, right? The narrator's not telling us who everybody is. So all we can go off is what we're reading. Not a drop of water is ever placed on my grave. Truly in death, we suffer all sorts of troubles. So someone is not having the dogs pee on their grave. True, true, Sayaji. But while you thus treat me with neglect, the witch went on, lying in my grave, I think of nobody but you. Oh, that's a good point. Now, what Coral stated earlier about them having a romantic relationship, not a parental one, right? So thinking about it in this sense doesn't sound like the way a mother or a parent would miss a child. It sounds like the way you'd miss a romantic partner, right? A lover. When you will join me in the underworld. Okay, so the underworld. In fantasy, it can be very difficult to understand some of their terms. So this is going to be a compound word. So if you've never heard of the word underworld, and when we get deeper into writing, I'm going to show you some tricks. I would literally break the word down. It's a compound word. Under meaning below, and then world meaning where you occupy. The fact that there's witches, the fact that they're being punished, the fact that you're talking about them being dead, and there's underworld, I can infer that underworld must be hell. Shall I come to meet you? No, no, don't do that, said Yaji. It's really too far for you. Well, then, I have one request to make. Yes, yes. What is it? Give this witch plenty of money. Okay, so again, we'd have to infer that the person who was meant to be punished is going to be punished, and that at the end, everyone is going to get what they deserve because that's the way we tell stories in this country, right? We have to have a clear resolution where all the loose ends are fixed, right? Or at least the majority of them. So even through that, having a conversation with everybody, taking my time reading, that took 7 minutes and 40 seconds. So I would expect that as you guys are reading, you're probably going to be more in the 4-minute range, right? Oh, I'm sorry. It's a little bit more to continue. Of course, of course. How sad the parting, cried the witch. I have yet much to tell you, countless questions to ask you, but the messenger of hell recalls me. So now we confirm they're definitely in hell, right? They just straight out said it. And the witch is talking about wanting more to say, and there's a bunch of questions. So maybe this kind of goes back to what Coral mentioned earlier. They sound like lovers, right? Then, recovering from her trance, the witch twanged her bow. Okay. So we had about another minute on what I said earlier. 8 minutes and 21 seconds. Any questions about what we read? Any other interpretations about what this story was about or who the characters are? Feel free to use a conference call, the live chat, the millions of ways you guys can get a hold of me. Questions so far?
I think the witch was the wife. Haji was the husband, and the witch is telling him how much he took on while she was alive. Never said anything back to him. She just went with it. She sacrificed basically a lot in her living life.
So what is this supposed to teach us? This is actually the next reading standard, which is theme, which everybody did fine with. But if we're taking notes, right, what message are we getting from the story? What's the theme? What's the lesson?
I always have trouble figuring out the lesson of the story.
And that's okay. So think about the characters, right? So one definition of theme, because is not necessarily the obvious lesson, but think about the main character and the way the main character solves a problem. So there's a problem here